So hello and welcome to the second of the data handling tutorials on Excel. This one we're going slightly more complicated, looking at some different types of graphs and doing some data transformation as well. What we've got here is some data looking at growth of spinach plants and how density of planting area affects the subsequent growth. Okay, it doesn't really matter what the data is, it's the principle that counts. This we're using in conjunction with the Data Handling 2 worksheet, which has all the bits and pieces explaining what I'm just talking about here. Okay, again we're looking for this if we wanted to, say for example, look at the relationship between mean density and mean weight. The most appropriate way of doing that would be using a scatter plot. Okay. So if we use a scatter plot for this data, we can do that fairly straightforward. Okay, again it's the usual fashion way we've done it before, so we go insert, scatter, blank. Okay, we're going to tell Excel what data we want. Okay, this is why I'm not highlighting it first, because the columns are not adjacent. So I need to go select data first and then go to add. Okay, so in terms of our graph that we're drawing, okay, so we're looking for mean density and mean weight. Okay, so our in terms of this, we're going to choose our, which way should we do it? Okay, we'll do our mean density for our x values. And then for our y values, we'll mean weight. Okay, click OK. Okay. Don't need to do that. Make it a bit bigger so it's easy to see. Do that. Okay. Looking at that, and even if we add a trend line to that, okay. There is something about that data that doesn't look entirely pleasing to the eye, anyway, shall we say. The main reason for that is our data is not of a linear type. Okay, so if you look at the data points, they form essentially this L shape. Okay. If we try to use linear analysis on it using a trend line, the trend line and line of best fit, okay, you can force one on there, but it does nothing to describe the relationship between the two variables. Okay, and if we were trying to use you know, some of that linear regression to work out one variable or the other, it would be very difficult. Okay, so in this case we can't really do sort of a straightforward scatter graph, because the data isn't suitable. But what we can do is transform that data using a log transformation. That's what I'm going to do. I'm going to get rid of that. Okay. So log transformation, what it does, essentially punches that data into a more straight linear relationship. So it keeps the relationship between each variable the same. It just makes it more normally distributed and more linear. Okay, so I'm just going to copy across these column headings so we know what we're doing. Paste those there. Okay. And then what I'll ask it to do is to do a log transformation. Okay, so, and this is a formula, so we use our equals sign. If we start typing log, what we get is various options. In this case, we're going to do a log 10 transformation. Excuse me. We're going to do log 10 transformation, double click, and we're going to do it on this first cell. Okay, we don't select the range of cells, we just select a single cell. Close bracket, we're going to do a log transformation of that cell, that gives our number. Okay, what we can then do is copy across and copy and fill down. Okay. Because it's done its loads of decimal points, it doesn't look entirely pleasing on the eye. What we can do is we can use this little bit here to increase or decrease the number of decimal points Excel expresses out, and we can decrease because the original data was expressed in 2 decimal points, I'm going to express this in 2 decimal points. Okay, so that's our log data. Hopefully then, if we do a graph of this, it's going to look a bit better. Okay, so what we'll do, we'll go to Insert, Scatter again. I'm going to select data. Okay, so X-values are our density. Doesn't matter, it's behind the graph, it's okay. Okay. Okay, so that's the graph we get. Okay, once Excel works up. And I'll just make that a bit bigger. Okay, I'm going to get rid of my series here. You can see it's drawn the graph. If you look at your data, it does look a little bit more sensible. Okay, and we can add a trend line on there. What you will notice though is it still looks a bit odd because you've got your x-axis at the top here, and it would probably make more sense if it's at the bottom, and you've got quite a bit of blank space over here, you could argue. Okay, so we can still tidy up this graph a bit. If we want to change where our x-axis intersects our y, again there's various ways. Okay, we can double click on this axis and we get axis options, and we have a little section that says horizontal axis crosses, and what we can do is say axis value. So rather than crossing at 0, we want it to cross down here. So if we put negative 1.4, okay, our x-axis now crosses down there, so that looks a lot more sensible. We've got this blank space here, okay, so we can get rid of a little bit of that. Again, double click. In this case, we want to change our minimum value. So our minimum in this case is automatic, which is 0. We're going to change that. So instead of a fixed value of 0, I'm going to put a fixed value of 0.9. Okay. So there, as long as you're clear and it's labelled on your graph, it's perfectly okay to do that. Again, what we can do is add trend line. I'll do it a different way this time. So click on your graph, click to layout, add trend line, linear trend line. So exactly the same as right clicking at your points. Okay, and again, if you want to add your equation of the line and your R squared value, right click over your, go format trend line, and then you can add those on. Going that way. Okay, so again, you've got your y squared value, sorry, your equation of the line and your R squared value. And here, using the log transformation, it's a much more sensible linear relationship between them. And again, you can go in and then you can add all your appropriate titles and axes, labels, and everything like that. Okay. So that's a scatter graph using that data. The other type of graph we can use is we can do histograms on your data. Okay, just because it's a bit neater, I'm just going to get rid of all of this. Okay. So a histogram we talked about in statistics is a way of giving us a nice visual picture of the distribution of the data. Okay. You can do that in Prism using things like box plots, and Prism will also draw histograms. If you're on Excel and you haven't got access to Prism, Excel will not draw box plots, but you can draw histograms with Excel. It's a bit of a faff, but you can do it. Okay, histograms then, essentially, just to remind you, will give you a frequency assigned to a numerical category. Okay, so it'll tell you how many people fit into that certain category. The categories we use, there's going to be a technical name called bin values. Okay. What we need to do to start with, we need to establish what our bin values are. So we're going to put bin there. Okay, so that's our bin column. What we're going to do is we're going to do a sort of histogram, and we will look at the mean height, okay, which is this column here. We need to decide what our bin values are, what's going to be appropriate. This is going to be a choice you're going to have to make. Here, probably the most appropriate, looking at the data, probably increments of 2 centimetres would be sensible. Okay, so our first bin is going to be 2. Okay, and we can go up from there. Okay, it's just sticking some decimal points on because I've flashed around those cells there. So we're going to go 2, 4, 6, 8, 10, 12, 14. Okay. Round those down, so it looks a bit odd. Okay, so those are your bin values, where our data is going to go. What we then need to do is we can work out our histogram. Okay. Under the Data tab on Excel, if you're using computers at university, this little button here that says Data Analysis should be there. Okay. If you're using a version of Excel at home, you may need to do something to add this on. Okay. If this is not there, if you go to File and go to Options and then go to Add-ins and then go to Manage Excel Add-ins and Go. Okay, there should be a little bit here, and you need to tick these boxes that say Analysis Toolbar and Analysis Toolbar VBA. Okay, if you click OK, that should then appear. Okay, so what we're going to do is, if you click this Data Analysis box, you get various bits and pieces in there. Okay, you can choose different things. Okay, we're going to do a histogram. Click OK. So what it will ask you is your input range. Okay, our input range is our data, in this case is our mean height. I'll then ask you what your bin range is. So these are our values here. There's also a little box here that says chart output. Okay, and that will actually draw the picture of your histogram. Okay, rather than just give you a physical count. So I'd advise, you can do it later, but it's easiest to tick it now. Okay, and then click OK. What it will do, it will stick it in a new sheet. Unless you ask it to, you can change that. So what it's drawn, make that a bit bigger, is a histogram. Okay, with your frequencies and your count. Okay, I can get rid of that again because it's useless. Our frequency here, and then our values here. You'll notice on the histogram what it does, it just labels it straightforward 2, 4, 6, 8, 10. Okay, that's not terribly helpful, but we can express it a bit more clearly. So if in here, if our bin values, you can overtype. Now, because rather than confuse Excel and make it think you're typing in a value or something, you want it to treat this as text. So for some odd reason you need to put an apostrophe first and then put 0 to 2. Okay, that's just because of Excel. Okay, and you'll see that's then gone to 0 to 2 on my graph. Okay, we then need to do that for the rest. You need to put an apostrophe before, and that's going to be 2 to 4. Oops. 2 to 4. Do these in a second. That's going to be 4, 6. 6 to 8. 8 to 10. I said it wasn't the easiest to do in Excel, but it is possible. This is why a more specialist program like Prism is quite good, because it takes a lot of this faff out of it. Okay, because it's designed to draw these graphs. Okay, so this is our histogram. Again, it will put a more category in there. If you don't want that, highlight it and delete it, and I should get rid of it. Okay. So that is our histogram. Again, with a histogram, technically you shouldn't have gaps between the bars. Okay, you can get rid of those. If you double click, I think, on the bars, then you can go to the series overlap and gap width if you go down to no gap. Okay, so technically in a histogram you shouldn't have gaps there, but you can't really tell the difference between the bars. So what you might want to do is put a border colour on, so you can put a line on the border of a different colour. In this case, if we put a black border on there, that allows us to differentiate between them a bit easier. And again, as before, you can go in and you can insert your titles, new axes titles.